We are all aware that this is the Thanksgiving holiday week, and we are, I guess, aware that, just a bit more than a month will be at Christmas time. That kind of brings mixed emotions for me. But what it means is we're deep into the midst of the holiday season. And it is absolutely true that it wasn't until last Wednesday that it fully dawned on me that this Sunday was the beginning of Thanksgiving week. And so it was too late for me to think about a Thanksgiving type lesson, but you know that I probably would not have done that anyway, because normally we make our way through series, and I kind of stay with the series. I will mention Thanksgiving before we finish, okay? We're in our second lesson, only our second lesson, the Gospel of John. By the way, I'm really glad that no one talked about football this morning. And I have decided that Greg McKee, I already decided this, is a really good guy for a lot of reasons. But this morning he did not wear that red vest that he has, and I love his compassion, okay? So, second lesson, the Gospel of John. And John keeps asking this question, or answering this question: who is Jesus? And last week we just looked at the first three verses of that book, and it told us that Jesus was God, and Jesus was creator. And now we move into other materials, other verses of Scripture, and I'm going to tell you at the outset, what we say this morning is going to be really simple. What we say this morning is going to be really brief. And what we say this morning, none of you need to hear. All of you know it. All of you know it. And we have people watching us from a distance. Bert told us a little while ago that Wednesday night he put a little short. He does these shorts from our lessons. He put a short on Wednesday night and had 1,200 people looking at it. Some of them didn't like it, I don't think. I mean, that's really true. A lot of times people don't like what we say. But for all those people watching, it's most likely that they don't even need to hear this. They already know what we're about to say. And yet, just maybe, by looking at an old subject all over again, it will somehow encourage us or be beneficial to us. And so we're going to begin in John chapter 1 and verse 4, and we're going to go through verse 12. It's kind of a long reading. You'll have it on the screen. You can read with me. I may use the screen or I may use this. I'm not sure which I can see better. I think I'll just use that. In him was life. That's talking about Jesus. In him, in Jesus, was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, be careful of that word overcome. It may be better translated understood or comprehended. The darkness could not understand it. They couldn't comprehend it. They couldn't see it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world. And though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. And yet to all those who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God. So you've all heard it before. Who is Jesus? And this time John says, he is the light. He's the light. Have you ever been in something really dark, really dark. Now, if you lived in Cordell, you've been in darkness, because when we have a storm or we have a strong north wind, some of us lose electricity. And if that happens at 10 o'clock at night and it's a stormy night and the stars aren't shining and the moon's not shining, inside your house, it's really, really black. And you've had the experience of kind of groping through the house and feeling of familiar landmarks, familiar pieces of furniture, till you finally get to that one drawer where you know there's a flashlight, and you click on the flashlight, and though it's a small, tiny beam of light, it is so refreshing. You can kind of see your way. It's an old illustration, but I think it's kind of an interesting illustration. Before the days of GPS, before all the technology, they had these structures on the seashore called lighthouses. Sue loves lighthouses, especially up in the northeast of our country. Because what would happen is a ship is sailing in the night, and maybe it's a foggy night, or maybe it's a stormy night, and the stars are not out, and that moon that God created is not out, and they're concerned about where they're going to land on that shore. Are they going to crash into the rocks? Are they going to end up in the wrong spot? Or far worse, maybe they get disoriented in the darkness, and they go a different direction, and they're out in some place in the ocean. They don't even know where they are. And so the keeper of the lighthouse will flash the light or keep the light, so they through the darkness can kind of see the light and know that's where I need to go. Have you ever been in total darkness and become disoriented? I remember one time, I'm actually just a slave to Mitch while I'm here. Mitch is in the audience today. I'm just a slave. And so I was in the river bottom, and it's in one place of river bottom. It's really isolated, and I was on a tractor, and I remember killing the tractor. I don't know why I killed it, where I killed it. I don't know. Lights are out. It's total darkness down there. And I've got to find my pickup. And I remember not being able to find it. I didn't know if I was going north or south or east or west. And there are certain sections on that where there's about 1.5 miles of river frontage. And if you just take the wrong step, you're going to go straight down. And somewhere along the way, I happened to see a little glint. I don't know, maybe it's a tiny bit of light flashing off my tag or some piece of chrome on that pickup. And I saw it, and I knew I could follow it. Light is wonderful. Light is really wonderful. But you and I live in a world that somehow can't see the light. Most people can't see it. So I want to show you a graph, or maybe a series of graphs, to try to describe what I'm saying. This first graph said, very simple, okay? I don't do anything very fancy. But this is the way it works for most people in life. This is the way it works for most organizations in life. The past and the future are the same. Because most people go through life and they practice the same habits. They do the same things over and over again. And they get all the way over here to the future, and they look back, and it's kind of like it was in the past. Nothing really ever changes. And so here I am at 30 years of age, and here I'm at 40 years and 50 years and 70 years, and nothing's really ever changed. You kind of live in the same kind of house, or maybe the exact same house, and you kind of live in the same place or a similar place, and you kind of practice the same habits you've always practiced. But that graph's really not all that accurate, because there's a little line that goes through that graph. And you heard me talk so many times about maybe the second law of thermodynamics or entropy and how everything is falling apart. And what that says is the world is getting darker. And we keep doing the same thing the same way, and it just keeps getting darker and darker and darker. And I kind of have a feeling it gets so dark, people don't even realize they're any longer in the darkness. They can't even determine they're there. And if you really want to know what Jesus is talking about in that statement in Matthew chapter 7, when he talks about a narrow way that leads to life and a broad way that leads to destruction, I've heard people have so many analyses of that. It may be that. It may be that. The broad, easy road is a road that you just keep doing the same thing the same way, and it gets darker and darker, and you're disoriented and you don't even know it. You're lost and you don't even know it. And yet sometimes people and sometimes organizations will stop. They'll stop. Look at the next graph. And they'll see a new future. They'll see a light. And I know what I know. I know to follow that light requires new choices, and it requires changes. And I can't keep doing the same thing the same way I've always done it. I've got to do some changes, but there's a new light. And John says Jesus came for that reason. He came because everybody's going in this world that's getting darker and darker. Do you believe the world's getting darker and darker? We talk about it all the time. How many illustrations could I possibly use about the world getting darker and darker? Do I talk about how television programming has changed? Do I talk about how movies have changed? Here's the one I'm on right now that I'm thinking about right now more and more. I have a true heart for school teachers. I'm talking in particular those who teach K through 12. Have you heard that we have a teacher shortage? Have you heard that? It's real. Have you heard that young people who could go into teaching don't want to go into teaching? And I know the pay is too low. I'm the first one to say, raise the pay, double the pay, triple the pay. I don't care. You pay for value. I don't pay anybody for time. I don't pay anybody for their expertise. I pay for their value. They're really valuable. But do you know, especially at the grade school level, they're walking away in droves? Some of my own friends at the grade school level have quit, and they've gone into real estate, and they've gone into other things. Why? Because talk to any of them, and they say, these little boys and these little girls are coming in, and they don't act very well. And they talk really horribly. And they have really bad habits. I'm going to tell all of you, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. Because that's what they're finding at home. That's what they're finding with moms and dads. Every single day, they're finding the same thing. But the moms and dads are going out to work, and they're finding it there. And the moms and dads are watching this sometimes ridiculous television programming. And it just gets darker and darker and darker. And I wonder where it's going. But it apparently was dark in the days that John wrote this book. And it just keeps getting darker all the while. Interesting today, Susan and I have our 4 grandchildren here. It won't be very long, the way they're growing up, that they'll be married. And they'll have their children. And I probably won't live long enough to see their children grow into adulthood and have their own kids. But how dark do you think this world will be by then? What will it be like for them to rear their children in that kind of space? Because it's getting darker all the time. And people don't even realize it. But Jesus came into this world. He created this world. He is God. He came, you catch that phrase a moment ago, he came to his own. He made us out of the dust of the earth. He came to his own, and his own would not receive him. But he's a light. He's a light who keeps shining in the darkness. And when people see that light, if they follow the light and they make the choices, here's what they become. John says they become the children of God. Or in verse 13, he says they are born of God. And what you have to understand, he says, John is very specific. It's not like you're going to get reborn physically. This is a totally different birth. I don't even want to get reborn physically. I don't remember what that was like, but it couldn't be that pleasant. But I get to be born of God. I get to become God's child. That's the light. That's the result. Now, he doesn't talk in John's gospel at this point about the process. We talked about the process. It's not his point. His point is to say, in this massively dark world, where people are so mistreated, and where there's so much violence that we cannot seem to get to stop, and where people say such ugly things to one another. Maybe you've had someone speak in ugly ways around you this last week. It's so common. And where people, did you catch a while ago I said Wednesday night, 1,200 people looked at a little short segment of our lesson? Did you catch that I said some people don't like it? Do you know that on the internet people can say things about a lesson or about a speaker, and they can say the ugliest things in the world and be anonymous, and they just say ugly things? And there are certain things on the internet where young people can see another young person up on the stage, and they may be singing, and they right there anonymously say all kinds of ugly things about that person, and they talk about how she looks, they talk about how he looks, they talk about this, they talk about that, and those young people read that, and they're crushed to the point that some of them say, life is not worth living. Tell me how dark this world is. That's a fact, what I just told you. It's an absolute fact. There's an app right now you can put on your phone that lets you do that. It just gets darker and darker. John says there's a light, and the light is Jesus. Now, told you I wouldn't talk about Thanksgiving much. I told you didn't need to hear all this. You already know it. But I'll tell you something. I am really thankful. I am really thankful that you don't need to hear this. I am really thankful that you've seen that light. I am really thankful that you followed the pathway toward that light. And I'm really thankful that you had the courage to change some things. I'm going to tell you, I don't like changing things in my life. I just don't like being dressed like this today. I am much more comfortable in jeans and boots. But some things you have to do. Sometimes you have to change some things. Jack leaves leading a prayer. He leaves and he comes back by and says, look at those shoes. You know, I got the white-soled shoes on today. Okay, Jack. I just ruined my lesson. Everybody, I know that following the light is not easy. And following the light means most of all saying no to myself. so many times. But I'm thankful that you follow the light. And I'm thankful that there are people still born of God who then in turn show light to others. And I'm thankful that these school teachers run across some young people once in a while who have parents who've seen the light. And I think the answer to the darkness of this entire world, the darkness of, as you've heard me say before, that lies in America, that lies in Russia, that lies in wherever, it's only going to be solved by the light of Jesus Christ.